do not want to spend my honeymoon climbing, hiking, sweating, bleeding, or suffering in any way.
In the world of Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Jadzia Dax wasn't just another character. She was the calm in the storm, the soul of the station, and a fan favorite whose journey felt unstoppable.
I rerouted the sensor interface.
It worked. Just counting the bridge.
But then, without warning, it all ended. Behind the cameras, pressures and choices collided in a way no one expected. And Terry Farrell, the actress behind Dax, made a decision that stunned both her castmates and loyal viewers. What really happened that forced her hand, and why did it change DS9 forever? From runway to runabout. Before Terry Farrell became Jadzia Dax, the Trill science officer who carried centuries of wisdom into the heart of Deep Space Nine, her story began far from a starship, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Like many small-town kids with oversized dreams, she took a leap that would change everything. In her junior year of high school, she submitted a photo to Elite Model Management, one of New York's powerhouse agencies. Within 2 days of arriving in the city, she had signed an exclusive contract with Mademoiselle magazine. Her rise was meteoric. Covers of Italian Vogue, German Vogue, and spreads in American Vogue soon followed. Terry Farrell had become a face recognized across fashion capitals, her look clean, modern, and versatile. But as dazzling as it seemed, the runway was not where her heart lived. After 18 months of non-stop modeling, she began to feel the limits of being valued only for her appearance. Acting classes opened a new door, one that let her explore voice, presence, and storytelling. Modeling would remain a way to pay the bills, but her focus shifted toward building a career that allowed depth, not just photographs. Her first steps into acting reflected this dual life. In 1984, she played a model in Paper Dolls, a TV drama that was canceled after one season, but gave Farrell her first steady role. In 1986, she landed a small part in Rodney Dangerfield's Back to School, her film debut. She then stitched together an eclectic resume, appearances on The Twilight Zone, Quantum Leap, and The Cosby Show. Each was a small notch on the ladder, proof that she was not just a model chasing camera time, but a performer steadily learning her craft. By 1992, she was going after meaty roles. That year, she was cast as Kat in the American pilot of Red Dwarf, an adaptation of the hit British sci-fi comedy. It looked promising, but was cancelled before it even aired. A setback like this for many actors would feel like a door being slammed shut. For Farrell, on the other hand, this was just the last bend in the road before hitting the jackpot. That jackpot was Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. When the casting began, however, Farrell was not the automatic choice. The producers had already assembled most of the cast. The extensive sets were built, the wormhole story in motion, and Farrell was called in to be the last piece. She literally stepped onto this soundstage alive with energy, expectation, and stress, knowing all the while that she had to prove herself out of the gate. It was a role of great ambition, one that would have involved Jadzia Dax in the character of a Starfleet science officer, but also Trill, one host body carrying a symbiont with the memories of 7 past lives. At some moments, the character had to express the wide-eyed confidence of youth, and at others, the deep wisdom of centuries. At times, she was thought to be approachable and mysterious, then again, playful yet solid. It was a challenge so different from anything she had come up against in her career. It was almost surreal. The enormity of the production eclipsed everything she had seen through the early years of her work. During the set of ops, she felt tiny among enormous sets, while hours of prosthetic makeup sessions had tested her patience. By the time shooting had begun, the producers decided to remove the forehead ridges and keep the now famous Trill spots. Her first shots had to be redone. Farrell confessed later that she felt overwhelmed at first, and her nerves were apparent to everyone there. And in that transformation, she stepped into the role that would redefine her career, becoming Jadzia Dax. When Terry Farrell first stepped onto the set of Deep Space Nine, she wasn't just beginning another acting job, she was stepping into one of television's most enduring franchises. By the early 1990s, Star Trek had become a cultural institution, with fans dissecting every detail and expecting new cast members to uphold a legacy decades in the making. Farrell, the last of DS9's main cast to be hired, faced the intimidating task of transforming from a relatively unknown actress into the embodiment of one of Trek's most unusual characters, Jadzia Dax. The role itself was daunting. Jadzia was a trill, a species that lived symbiotically with long-lived creatures called symbionts. These symbionts carried the memories and experiences of their previous hosts, meaning Jadzia, though only 28 years old, carried the wisdom of 8 lifetimes. Portraying her demanded more than charm. It required projecting the calm and depth of someone who had seen centuries, while still capturing the curiosity and warmth of a young Starfleet officer. Farrell later admitted she didn't feel wise or grounded in real life. She was still finding her footing as a young actress, wrestling with insecurities and the pressure of Hollywood. Yet the producers recognized something in her presence, an inner stillness that matched their vision of Dax. That paradox would define the character: outward serenity, hiding layers of complexity. From the first day, the logistics of becoming Jadzia were overwhelming. Farrell remembered being stunned by the sheer scale of the station's operations set, with its blinking consoles, bustling crew, and towering command chairs. "I felt like a deer in headlights," she confessed. Beyond learning to carry herself in a Starfleet uniform, she had to deliver dialogue packed with scientific jargon and philosophical musings while standing alongside veteran actors like Avery Brooks, Nana Visitor, and Renee Auberjonois. The physical transformation was just as challenging. Initially, the makeup department designed the Trill with forehead prosthetics, similar to Klingons or Bajorans. Farrell endured long hours in the chair, feeling weighed down and alien under the heavy appliances. But the look didn't work. Makeup legend Michael Westmore made a pivotal decision: scrap the prosthetic and introduce the now iconic spots running from her temples down her body. While subtle, the change gave Jadzia elegance and brought out Farrell's natural expressiveness. However, this change meant reshooting some of her early scenes, which was hardly encouraging for a newcomer already pressured into proving herself. Farrell was slowly becoming herself in the role. Through Jadzia, she encountered qualities not yet developed in her personal life. The character's grace became armor against the dampness of her insecurities. "Playing Dax made me feel secure," she said later. "It was like having an anchor." The character was also the other way around. Centuries of experience began to mingle with youthful vitality. The audience responded to this interplay of steadiness against youthfulness. Jadzia could end up philosophizing with Sisko in one scene and then getting drunk on blood wine with the Klingons in the next. She was wise without being cold, witty without being superficial. Farrell's own humor and warmth came through in the role, assuring that Dax never felt aloof or inaccessible. Their dynamic with Avery Brooks was particularly key. There was history there, since the Dax symbiont had once lived inside Sisko's mentor Curzon. Sisko treated Jadzia not just as a junior officer, but as an old friend. Farrell leaned into that nuance, playing the delight of one who remembers Sisko's youthful mischief, yet is now experiencing him with fresh eyes. It added layers to the arc of the captain, and positioned Dax as the station's moral and emotional center. By the end of the first season, Farrell had silenced all doubt concerning her casting. Jadzia Dax quickly became one of DS9's most beloved characters, her mix of intelligence, bravery, and wit being indispensable to the crew. For Farrell, who almost by accident had stumbled into science fiction, the complete turnabout was more than anything scripted. She transformed from the unsure newcomer into the character's ageless voice, one who bore within her the soul of 8 lifetimes. But while the character was soaring, the daily grind behind the role would soon reveal just how much endurance Farrell needed to survive the station. The load, schedule, scope, survival. Working on Deep Space Nine wasn't just a role, it was a marathon. For Terry Farrell, stepping into Jadzia Dax meant carrying the weight of a beloved franchise while enduring one of the most grueling schedules in the 1990s television. Fans saw polished episodes with layered plots and dazzling effect. What they didn't see was the grind. 14-hour days, 5-day weeks, and long nights that left the cast drained. Star Trek had always been ambitious, but Deep Space Nine raised the stakes. Unlike the next generation's mostly episodic approach, DS9 built long arcs full of politics, battles, and character growth. That meant heavier dialogue, tighter continuity, and bigger demands on the actors. For Farrell, still early in her career, the workload was daunting. She later described her early years on set as survival mode, a constant state of exhaustion where quitting wasn't an option. Even makeup became a daily test. The trill spots may have looked simple, but each one was hand-painted from forehead to ankle, often taking more than an hour. At first, Farrell endured it patiently, but as the seasons wore on, she admitted mornings often began in silence, conserving strength for the hours ahead. Then came the dialogue. Star Trek scripts weren't casual. They were dense with techno-babble, science jargon, and philosophical nuance. Farrell had to deliver lines about quantum fluxes and subspace anomalies with ease, all while sounding authentic. Memorization became ritual. She often stayed up late drilling lines until they flowed naturally, knowing the camera caught every hesitation. It is basically very emotionally charged. A lot of her more well-known co-stars, Avery Brooks, Nana Visitor, and Renee Auberjonois, were very much veterans in the game. Farrell sometimes felt like the newcomer trying to keep up with them. But to turn the pressure off, she converted it into energy. "I was always trying to come up to the level of all the people around me," she reflected much later. The challenge intensified her skills and gave Jadzia the poise and confidence that fans came to adore. But the studio's expectations did not leave much breathing space. Paramount wanted 26 episodes each season, almost twice as many as today's average. That kind of pace meant finishing one story on Friday and beginning another by Monday. Vacations were few, and personal lives went unrecorded. While Farrell yearned for opportunities to expand her craft with other projects, the schedule simply left no room for it. By the end of season 6, she confessed she was burnt out, not because she didn't love Dax, but simply because she couldn't picture surviving another year at that kind of pace. The scripts themselves grew heavier as well. The more the show penetrated the war, the more it demanded of Farrell. She was not always fully himself. Wisdom, humor, grief, fury, all that sometimes in a single episode. Jadzia was not an easy girl. She bore ages' worth of experiences and still looked like anything merry, curious, and youthful. The little anchors that kept her afloat throughout this chaos were friends from the cast. Michael Dorn, who joined as Worf in Season 4, became her on-screen partner and support off-screen. His calm authority would remind her that to work on herself, she had to embrace it rather than hide it. Those relationships gave her strength on days when exhaustion threatened to cripple her. Never mind the cost, it was truly horrendous. Farrell once described the loop: learn lines, sit through makeup, perform, fall, repeat. The glamour on screen erased the exhaustion underneath. By season 6, the question was not whether she loved Jadzia. The question became whether any part of her soul could endure the ceaseless butcher of survival. Dax was everything for the audiences, a being of wit, wisdom, and vitality. Meanwhile, in the background, Farrell was struggling to hang on to a train that practically never slowed down. And as that grind collided with studio politics, Farrell soon faced a choice that would define not only her future on the show, but Jadzia's fate itself. The negotiation wall. By the end of season 6, Terry Farrell faced a wall, not of Cardassian steel or Dominion firepower, but of studio resistance. After 6 years of embodying Jadzia Dax, she wasn't asking to abandon the role. What she wanted was balance. Farrell hoped to renegotiate her contract so she could appear in fewer episodes during the final season, giving her time to explore other projects and regain a life outside the station. What should have been a conversation quickly became a standoff. At the center of that wall stood executive producer Rick Berman. As the franchise's steward after Gene Roddenberry's death, Berman wielded enormous influence over Star Trek in the 1990s. Farrell later recalled that her requests were met not with understanding, but pressure. Rather than discuss compromises, she felt cornered by ultimatums. According to her, the message from the top was blunt: all 26 episodes, or none at all. For Farrell, the request wasn't about ego, but survival. The 26-episode grind had drained her physically and emotionally. Years of 14-hour days, heavy dialogue, and endless retakes left little time for family or creative growth. She wasn't seeking a clean break, just a shift to recurring status, still present, but with breathing room. Other television series had used that model, but under Berman's leadership, Star Trek wasn't willing to bend. The atmosphere at work was terrifying, according to Farrell. She recalled offhand comments about her body, jokes that cut deeper than intended, and basically an atmosphere of being less than supported and more of being squelched. Negotiation, as she said, had become intimidation. Junior producers would warn her that without DS9, she'd be working retail, just to keep her tied to the show. Another would call her just before filming, asking if she'd signed. To Farrell, it sounded more like an effort to wear her down than a negotiation. Berman, for his part, said he was not the one who pushed her out. He just did not have the final authority, and Paramount simply denied her request. Yet, as Farrell said, there was no way the tone of that contention left her any option. The wall did not budge, so she made that choice to put her dignity ahead of compromise. The fallout came quickly. Producers made a bold and divisive decision because they did not want to leave Dax's future unresolved. They wrote her death into the Season 6 finale, Tears of the Prophets, instead of gently writing her out or leaving her story open. The cast was shocked, and fans were blindsided. Slaying off a character at that point felt almost cruel, even for one who had become the very soul of the show. Farrell acknowledged later that she wished they had left Dax alive, a possibility that could have afforded Dax guest star appearances, but that option disappeared once negotiations fell apart. The cast on screen felt the same tension among them. Showrunner Ira Steven Behr confessed that he did not grasp the depth of the conflict until too late. He said that had he been more aware, he would have fought harder to retain Dax, remaking several episodes in the process. According to Farrell, the absence of supporters during negotiations only made the pain more difficult to bear. She felt alone in the franchise she had helped build, as if all those years of work were worthless because of a contract clause. All these weren't episodes. It was all about power, respect, and the price of ambition. Another actress not doing a major role was not a pioneering event, but it did expose the underbelly of cracks in the Star Trek machine, showing how easily voices of performance, especially among women, could be drowned out by studio power. At the end, the wall held strong, and those battles spilled directly into the story, changing the shape of one of DS9's most pivotal episodes. Tears of the Prophets. The 6th season of Deep Space Nine had pushed Star Trek storytelling into uncharted territory. The Dominion War raged across the Alpha Quadrant. Alliances shifted, and the crew of the station had endured heavy losses. As the season drew toward its finale in 1998, viewers expected a high-stakes cliffhanger. What they did not expect was the end of Jadzia Dax. Tears of the Prophets, written as the capstone to that season, carried with it both narrative ambition and behind-the-scenes consequence. The episode revolved around Captain Sisko's controversial plan to launch an offensive into Cardassian space. But while politics and war filled the front half of the script, the heart of the story, and the heartbreak, unfolded in the station's temple. Jadzia's death was shocking, not just because she was beloved, but because of how it unfolded. In one of the episode's quieter moments, Jadzia visited the Bajoran temple to pray for a child. It was a tender glimpse into her future with Worf, a rare moment of peace in a season dominated by conflict. Then came Gul Dukat, possessed by the malevolent Pa-wraiths. In a flash of violence, he struck her down, her body collapsing in a halo of light as the Pa-wraiths lashed out at the prophets themselves. By the time Worf rushed to the infirmary, she was already slipping away. Dr. Bashir saved the Dax and the symbiont, but Jadzia, the woman fans had grown with for 6 years, was gone. On screen, it was devastating. Off screen, it was business. The writing staff had been told they could not keep Jadzia alive. Contract negotiations with Terry Farrell had collapsed, and the producers had decided death was the only way to close her arc. Ira Stephen Bear later admitted he hated writing the scene, knowing how much it would hurt the fans and how sudden it would feel. For him, it was less a creative choice than a mandate. The fandom felt the episode's repercussions immediately. For the past 6 years, Jadzia had embodied a rare combination of intellect, humor, and fearlessness. She was a warrior and a scientist, a confidant and a lover. Slaying her not only brought the character's journey to an end, but it also broke the ensemble's emotional core. Worf's grief continued into Season 7, but many fans felt robbed of watching its development into a full marriage. For Captain Sisko, the loss of an old friend who had been the latest host of his centuries-old confidant Curzon was a bitter blow. The way the death was staged also became its subject of debate. Some had argued that it was rushed, shoved into the middle of a larger war storyline. Others felt it unfairly treated Dax as a character, reducing her final moments to merely a victim of Gul Dukat's possession rather than giving her a chance to go out in style. Farrell herself would later express her discontent that Jadzia did not get a more dignified or open-ended exit. Had the character just been transferred away from Deep Space Nine, there would have still been options for Farrell to return for guest spots, or even rejoin if need arose. Whether for good or for ill, Tears of the Prophets will forever be among the most unforgettable episodes of DS9 since it delivered awe upon its audience. It exemplified the dark and daring ethos of this series, where the next generation aligned all its floating pieces of drama by the end of each episode, banishing any of their consequences from ever affecting its universe. Characters carried scars, losses lingered. The war had a real cost, so Jadzia's death was an act of storytelling that made clear that no one was safe, not even a main character. But a bitter taste remains. The introduction of Jadzia Dax in Season 7 divided fans. Some embraced this fresh incarnation, while many viewed her as a reminder of what was lost. As if mourning, Jadzia's absence cast shadows over every scene, and the mark it left was impossible to ignore when the series returned, with the station itself carrying the weight of loss. Aftershocks at the station. When Season 7 of Deep Space Nine began, the station felt different. Jadzia's absence wasn't just a hole in the cast list, it was a void running through every relationship and storyline. The episode Afterimage, which introduced Jadzia Dax, acknowledged the loss directly. The crew struggled to move forward while carrying grief, and the aftershocks of her death rippled through the station both narratively and emotionally. For Captain Benjamin Sisko, the loss was deeply personal. Through Curzon Dax, one of Jadzia's earlier hosts, he had shared decades of friendship and mentorship. Their bond was unique in Star Trek, a commanding officer tied not just by duty, but by lifetimes of history. Losing Jadzia felt like losing that connection. Worse, it came as the Federation faced its greatest trial, the Dominion War. Avery Brooks played Sisko's grief with quiet devastation, balancing the duty of leadership with the ache of losing someone who was both colleague and family. For Worf, the loss cut even deeper. His marriage to Jadzia had revealed unexpected warmth in a character often portrayed as unyielding. Through her, viewers had seen Worf as a husband, vulnerable and deeply in love. Jadzia's death shattered that story. In early Season 7, his grief dominated his arc. He sought honor in battle, clashed with allies over how to preserve her memory, and embarked on a dangerous mission to secure her place in Sto-vo-kor, the Klingon afterlife. For many fans, it was the most human Worf had ever felt, though it came at the cost of stripping away his happiness. The wider crew also felt the shock. Kira Nerys, who had shared camaraderie and conflict with Jadzia, suddenly found her friend gone. Dr. Bashir, who once carried unrequited love for her, faced a quiet regret. Even Quark, who often bantered with her across the bar, seemed muted. Jadzia had been the connective tissue among the crew, the one who could move easily between Klingons, Bajorans, Trill, and humans. Without her, each relationship had to recalibrate. The advent of Jadzia Dax became a way for the writers to comment on those changes. As the new host of the symbiont, Jadzia carried Jadzia's memories, but not her personality. She was unpracticed and, on some level, discombobulated by that connection to Jadzia. They may have found it comforting or jarring, seeing Jadzia in one another while feeling that she'd now left them. To some fans, Jadzia became a way for them to explore their feelings about death and identity. To others, she became a tiresome reminder of what had been lost. Regardless, this choice bolstered the theme at the heart of DS9. Actions have consequences, and not all can be righted. But shockwaves were felt off-camera, too. Many cast members were shaken by Farrell's departure, lamenting a lack of dignity in her exit. Perhaps, as Alexander Siddig conveyed, Season 7 became heavier, less joyous without her presence, and that chemistry between the ensemble, which had been the lifeblood of DS9, never seemed to recover fully. Yet abandonment cemented one of the key elements in the series. Scars persisted. Unlike the foregoing Trek series, where losses were few and far between, DS9 allowed tragedy to linger. The Dominion War was no mere backdrop. It was an affecting forge of change for everyone. Jadzia's death was part of that change, adding more dynamics into the equation and forcing characters to grapple with their own sense of mortality. The Aftershocks had long since resonated with the fans after the finale. Conventions, online boards, and fan mail argued over whether Jadzia should have died, whether Jadzia was a suitable successor, and whether Farrell was treated fairly. And in those reverberations, fans and Farrell alike found themselves asking the haunting question, what if? After Dax, Bridges, and What Ifs. When Jadzia Dax was slain off at the end of Season 6, it didn't just close a storyline. It broke a bridge between the crew, the audience, and the future of Deep Space Nine. The question that lingered long after the finale was simple. What if? What if Terry Farrell had stayed? What if the producers had compromised? What if Jadzia had continued to grow through the Dominion War's climax? For fans, those questions created an alternate canon. Some imagined Jadzia as a war hero, fighting beside Worf in the Federation's last battles. Others pictured her as an ambassador after the war, using centuries of wisdom to rebuild alliances. The richness of the Dax character, part scientist, part warrior, part confidant, made it easy to envision futures that ended too soon. Within the fandom, debates grew fierce. Some felt Jadzia Dax added something new, a vulnerable counterpoint to Jadzia's poise. Others argued Ezri's presence only sharpened the sense of loss. Still, her existence formed an unusual bridge between past and present. The Dax symbiont carried echoes of Jadzia, though never truly replacing her. That choice was bold, even divisive, but it reinforced one of DS9's core strengths, its refusal to dodge consequences. Behind the scenes, Farrell's departure sparked wider questions about how actresses were treated in the television industry of the 1990s. Her candid interviews about clashes with Rick Berman, Her request for fewer episodes and her claims of sexism reframed her exit as something larger than one contract dispute. Many fans took it as an example of a franchise reluctant to bend to make an accommodation for its talent, even at the expense of the story itself. That bitter truth is still present today, as Hollywood struggles with respect, power, and gender issues. Yet, the story for Farrell did not end there. Just after the show, she found herself in another sitcom, Becker, in a much lighter atmosphere, working alongside Ted Danson. It revealed her comedic chops and gave her the creative space she had been wanting for a long time. Later, in A Marriage with Adam Nimoy, the son of Leonard Nimoy, the original Spock, she again became connected to the Star Trek legacy. For a while, it seemed to be a poetic bridge between two generations of Trek history. Even though the marriage came to an end, it showed how the Star Trek family holds ties to one another even beyond the screen. Farrell herself reflected candidly on the what-ifs. Leaving DS9 was, she confessed, one of the hardest professional decisions she made at conventions. How she might have fit into the last stand of the station often left in her mind a picture of Jadzia during a series finale, which she often bemoaned at missing. Yet, she is also thankful for those fans who never failed to celebrate Dax through cosplay, quoting her lines, and filling the halls of conventions with cheers every time she made an appearance. Jadzia's legacy didn't end when she died on screen. It lives on in fan fiction, fan art, and panel discussions where Farrell shares memories with her castmates. It lives on every time a new viewer watches DS9 for the first time and falls in love with the witty, fearless science officer who became the soul of the station. If Jadzia's exit still hits you, drop a like. Tell us in the comments, should DS9 have found a part-time path for Terry Farrell? Subscribe for more deep dives into TV's biggest behind-the-scenes turning points. And when you're ready, watch the next video on your screen for another story that changed a franchise in one decision.